Okay, hello, and welcome to the first JWS Learning podcast of the new academic year. This is number 7, and the focus today is building learning power. My name is Jonathan Huddleston, and as always, I'm joined by Jonathan Watson.
Hello.
And as I said, the focus is building learning power. Now, the reason we're looking at this is because this is a key focus for the teaching and learning at the John Warner School this year. But all the principles behind it are very logical and very sensible, and the kind of thing that you probably use in any sort of practice, any school, whether you're following a specific program or not. So I think the key is, John, perhaps you'd like to go and give the listeners an explanation of what building learning power really is.
Okay, building learning power starts from the premise that you can actually become more intelligent. Every single person, student, adult, boy, girl, can be smarter than they actually are. That doesn't mean that you can just learn more things, learn more science, or learn more history. It means your capacity for learning can be much higher. Previously, many educationalists used to think that there would be caps on your intelligence and that it comes from your genes. But recent scientific research is saying that, okay, of course there are genetic influences on your lives. You can't avoid that, but they are very, very small. And actually, what influences how bright you are, how smart you are, is actually your environment. Your genes will get turned up and turned down by the environment that you're found in. What's most important to remember then as a result of that is that current achievement doesn't say anything about how far you can go. Just because you're achieving something now doesn't mean that you can't achieve something completely different next year. So basically you can become more intelligent. Students can become more intelligent. You can become more intelligent than you currently are. And the reason for that is because intelligence is not just one thing. We don't just have one kind of element of intelligence. Intelligence is actually many, many elements in us. And a bit like our muscles in our body, it's about flexing those learning muscles. Each element is a learning muscle, each part of it, the concept of intelligence, and it's about improving those elements. And if we improve those learning muscles, then we can get more intelligence. Our capacity to learn will be greater.
Okay, thanks. And I think you probably made a very pertinent point there. I know that there's a lot of work at some universities in London at the moment about sort of the useless or the not particularly effective nature of biometric testing and all this idea of what cognitive abilities and what people might have. Because I think they were finding that it wasn't really until people were sort of 21, 22 before actually you could genuinely judge their IQ. Before that, it was more a reflection of the IQ of their parents who'd had an effect on their upbringing. So I think you make a very useful point. I guess the problem people will be having is, well, this is very logical in terms of what the kids need to develop and what they need to learn. What does it mean in practice? What does it look like?
Jonathan, great question. And I think the best thing to do is for me to give you 2 examples that I've cited a few times in our school. Okay, and 2 examples of how you can strengthen learning muscles that are part of the concept of intelligence. John, have you ever had something on the tip of your tongue, and to be honest, you just can't remember someone's name, or you can't just get it off the tip of your tongue?
A word of vocabulary.
Right.
Frequently.
The reason that there's a learning muscle that relates to that, okay, and that is your sensitivity to occasion. If you were in the environment when you first learned whatever it is on the tip of your tongue that you can't say, then you would be able to get it off the tip of your tongue. But by strengthening your learning muscle sensitivity to occasion, you would have things less on the tip of your tongue and more coming out of your mouth. Okay.
Yeah.
Second example, John, have you ever been said that you're highly intelligent but lack common sense?
Frequently.
Frequently,
suggest,
yes.
yeah.
Well, lots of people have heard that phrase. That's because if we might be great at rational decision making, that might be a learning muscle that we've strengthened a lot, but we might not have strengthened our intuition learning muscle, and therefore we can't switch from rational decision making to using our intuition. If we strengthened our intuition muscle, then people might not think that we lack common sense that are very intelligent, because that muscle has been strengthened. Just 2 examples of how you can become smarter.
So as teachers who are sort of trying to change something in our practice for the pupils in our care, are you advocating doing 16 learning muscles in one, or one thing, or what? How do you think the best way as a teacher we could look at improving this?
Okay, let me answer that first of all by saying what the worst way is. Okay, the worst thing ever is to take students out of their normal subjects, okay, and say, right, we need to make you more intelligent before you can go back in there. For all that was good about the Learning to Learn program, that was its ultimate flaw. That was its ultimate failure, that you have to learn before you can learn. That's not right. You can learn to be more intelligent whilst you are learning. And I'll give you an example of that, if that's okay.
Yeah. Good.
Right. You know, I can't really play the piano. Okay, but I could learn to play the piano, right? I can learn to play the piano by strengthening some learning muscles. But in order to get good at the piano, I will have to strengthen some muscles further. My resilience, my ability to bounce back from mistakes, my intuition as well, in order to cope with those situations. Of course, the best way to strengthen those learning muscles is still whilst I am learning to play the piano. There's an interesting case study I read that the reason why, it used to be believed that you have to start young. But the reason you start young is because when you're young, you're actually strengthening those learning muscles in other situations. As long as you accept that you're not just learning the piano, but you're learning how to learn the piano when you're learning the piano, then you'll get better at learning the piano.
Okay, I like that a lot. It makes a lot of sense to me. So effectively what you're suggesting here is that there might be something we see in lessons which is a sort of very tangible, obvious process that maybe a teacher is doing something differently in terms of developing a particular learning muscle, or it might just simply be something in terms of a change of mindset, a different approach, a different
most definitely,
positive
yes.
mindset.
Most definitely, and I think those words positive approach are very important because students, especially secondary school students, I think, will believe that their intelligence is fixed. They will believe, I can only get a C, I can only get a B, I can't get a C, I can only get an E, I'm only suitable for BTECs, I can't do GCSE, right? That's what they will believe. But the problem is that if you believe it, then it will be true because it's a fulfilling prophecy. That's the only thing that caps your intelligence. If you believe that that's as far as you can go, then of course that's as far as you're going to go. So we as teachers need to get students to change that mindset. How are we modelling ourselves in order to change that mindset?
Okay, thanks, John. Now, I know that you've actually been reading a really interesting book as well at the moment, looking into the effects of myelin in the brain. And I think this probably links very clearly to what we're sort of talking about here. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, I do. And I'm going to start with an example, okay? John, obviously when you learn to drive for the first time, you probably found that quite difficult.
Yeah,
right.
Pretty useless to be honest.
Yeah, right. You're doing with things with your feet that you've never really done before. Whilst looking, there's so many things going on there. Okay. Now, when you were learning to drive, after one lesson, you probably made lots of progress. Then, when you came back to your second lesson a week later, you probably got frustrated because you felt you'd lost some of that skill.
I stalled a lot of time.
Right. Yes. Yeah. The reason for that is because you haven't embedded the skill. But what is the reason for that? In our brains, when we're embedding a skill, our brain is producing myelin. Now, learning is all about, without going into too much detail, it's the firing of neurons. In effect, you're creating circuits in your brain, a bit like an electrical circuit. Now, if you have a copper wire as part of a circuit, if you don't insulate that copper wire, then energy is going to be lost as heat or whatever else. Okay, the circuit. I know this might not be the correct scientific way of saying it, but you're going to lose the energy, aren't you? Okay, it's going to go. Now, if you insulate that with copper wire, it's going to stay there.
Yeah.
So in your brain, when you're embedding a skill, it's also got to be insulated, and recent research has shown that it's insulated by myelin. Okay, if you only do something once, you won't have enough myelin to insulate that skill. You're not insulating those neurons that are firing in your brain. However, when you kept practicing to learn to drive, you went over and over it, you are producing more and more myelin. Therefore, if you were not now to drive for the next 10 years, you would still be able to drive in 10 years' time. Okay, it's a bit like, with a bike, you never forget to ride a bike. That's why it's insulated with myelin. However, John, do you feel that your ability now, bearing in mind you've been driving for
about 20 years.
20 years. Do you feel that now you are getting better at driving?
No, probably not. I'm just going through the motions.
Yeah, you're going through the motions, and that's because there is no new learning. You are not embedding any new skills. You are just doing the same thing. However, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if you were to have a near miss, if you were to suddenly have to drive in a way that you never had to before in order to, stop yourself getting injured, okay, you are going to learn from that, okay, and that's going to produce some more myelin, okay, so you are going to get better at that. Effortless practice won't make you better at something. You'll only get better at something if you're working on the edge of your ability. This is why, this goes back to what I was saying about piano players. If you are practicing to play the piano by just playing away, you're not going to get better at playing the piano. You have to constantly play things that you can't play. So if you want to get better at driving, you're going to have to constantly put yourself in situations that have never happened before to get more myelin to make that skill better. Why am I saying this? What's this got to do with anything? Well, if we want students to become smarter, to become more intelligent, we have to put them on the edge of their ability. We have to constantly challenge them to produce that myelin.
John, I think that's a fantastic thing, and I'm going to just draw an idea that came to me. You said that, and I was listening to Clive Woodward, who's actually thought psychologically about quite a lot of these things. Yes. And he was talking yesterday on the radio about why were the All Blacks the most likely team to win the next World Cup, and it was because what rugby produces is a lot of gym bunnies, as in people who spend their whole time exercising muscles and building up muscle power and muscle technique. But what crucially they're not practicing are those sorts of subtle skills that actually, when you're in a game situation, you're going to have to employ to actually get through a particular sort of a line. And what the New Zealanders are doing so effectively is allying the two together. So they actually are building up their physical prowess, but at the same time they're making sure they're having new experiences and new opportunities to widen their learning, as opposed to the kind of more sort of Bosch mentality of the English game.
I think that's an excellent analogy in it. And if you don't mind me saying, the Olympic rower Redgrave, right? I remember once a long time ago seeing an interview with him, and they were filming him on the rowing machine in the gym. And he was talking about, look, I'm not, let's be honest, I'm in the gym just to keep my stamina up because I can't go on the water all the time. But he's basically saying, I can't go into the gym and not do at least one more of those kind of reps on the rowing machine than I did last time. Because if I don't do one more, then I haven't got better. And that's, even though he might not have realised it, that's for the same reason, isn't it? He has to challenge himself even a tiny bit more so that he gets some more myelin.
John, as ever, it's been absolutely fascinating. And that's the end for this week.